Welcome everybody. Before we start, I would like to acknowledge and pay my respect to the traditional custodians of the land we meet today, the Bedegal people. I pay my respect to elders past, present, and emerging, and extend that respect to any Aboriginals or Torres Strait Islanders people here today. Henk Heusler, I'm the professor here at UNSW in computation design. I'm the director of the ARC Center for Next Gen Architectural Manufacturing. So welcome to UNSW. UNSW School in Built Environment is now officially #2 in the country in architecture. Thanks, Phil, for all your hard work. So we're quite proud of you making that achievement. 23 in the country, so it's a great achievement from all the colleagues here. We formed ArchMenu, the ARC Center, to address some of the critical issues in the AEC sector. But what are the problems that we've got in the AEC sector? Well, for once, we produce a lot of carbon, around 50% plus minus, depending which country you ask from. We produce a lot of landfill, waste is produced. And if you think about it, it's quite clear. If we demolish a building, lots of waste. When we build a building, probably 10 to 15% of the new materials go straight into landfill as well. So waste is a problem. We consume most resources on planet Earth, around 60%, to build our infrastructure buildings. So it's an enormous amount. But at the same time, we don't really have a good track record. Quite often, projects are delivered over budget, over time, and not for the benefit of the communities. So that's really what drives us in ArchMenu, these 6 things. And we can see a solution or a pathway towards solving these problems through the engagement of digital tools. Digital tools have 2 big advantages. They've got speed and scalability. So just think about when you write an email. Shouldn't touch the thing so much, huh? When you write an email, it takes you 5 minutes to write the email. Immediately, you can send that email to a person. It's nearly instant. And it also doesn't really matter if the email is sent to 1 person or 1 million people. It's the same thing. So digital tools have scalability and speed inherent in their systems. So we really think that digital tools could help us with a digital sustainability framework to combine both things together. And therefore, we are very, very honored and very, very pleased to have Product Aware here because it's a perfect example for that kind of way of thinking. Again, you've got a tool that sees a a sustainable problem, and through the digital, you can do a lot of things here. And through the digital framework, you've been in a position to, again, give access to information instantly to people, not just 1 person, but potentially all people in the country, and instant when they want to need that. So that's why we invited our speakers today and to talk about the digital solution they developed to tackle some of these issues. So Product Aware is a free Australian platform designed to empower architects and designers to provide easy access to and the ability to compare comprehensive sustainability data for building products. Developed by volunteers from Architects Declare, the platform was created with the Australian architectural community in mind. Its core mission is to promote responsible material choices, ensuring that sustainability is not an afterthought, but a central pillar of the specification process through fully transparency of data. So today we hear from 3 people involved in this creation process. So let me quickly introduce them, starting with Lucy. Lucy Sutton is an interior designer, strategist, and industrial leader in sustainable design in her role as Associate Director at Bates Smart. With over 19 years of architecture interior design experience, she had led the interior for a number of significant and award-winning workplace, residential, and education projects in Australia and abroad. Driven to change the status quo, Lucy is constantly seeking ways to create a better, more sustainable, and social conscious design and construction. As the next person, we've got Valerie here next to me. Valerie Davida Lux is a regional practitioner with international experience in architecture, urbanism, landscape, and interior design, dedicated to enhancing the health of people and the planet. Trained across multiple disciplines, she excels in creating net positive outcomes through holistic system thinking. Valerie thrives on co-creation with multiple disciplinary teams, believing the built environment can regenerate both humanity and the planet. After leading regenerative design strategies and implementation in major architectural studios, she now teaches here at UNSW, thank you, and consults on sustainable and regenerative design practices. Lastly, not least, Dr. Matthias Irger. Matthias, hello. Matthias Irger is an experienced architect, urban designer, and academic specializing in regenerative design, holistic planning, and climate adaptation. Did his PhD here at the UNSW as well. As the National Head of Sustainability at Cox Architecture, Matthias creates national strategies, objectives, actions, and tools that reduce and mitigate the embodied and operational carbon emission across all services. A legitimate and strategic thinker, Matthias champions an evidence-based, collaborative, and interdisciplinary approach, specializing in regenerative design, holistic city planning, and climate adaptation. He is driven by a passion to reconcile the objectives of livability and a carbon zero future, and its practical application in architecture, urban design, and strategic planning. So I want to hand over now to the team to present their tools. So again, thank you very much for coming here at UNSW and in the New South Wales context, presenting your tool here at UNSW. Thanks a lot.
So thank you all for being here, and I'd also like to pay my respects to, oh sorry, I need to stand, sorry, I won't be doing my sort of standard walking because apparently I'm being recorded, like also to you guys, we need to stand here, so sorry about that. I'd also like to pay my respects to the Bedegal people of the country where we're standing on today, and also just acknowledge that they are really the traditional, sustainable and regenerative practitioners, and we've got so much to learn from them, and we're lucky to be in this country to follow their steps. Just before I get started with product aware, I'm just interested to know how many of you have actually heard of Architects Declare before. Okay, not so many. So I'll tell you a little bit about Architects Declare, because Product Aware is an initiative of Architects Declare. So Architects Declare is a global movement of architectural practices and individuals that have come together to take action on the climate and biodiversity crisis. And in Australia, we've got now about 1,200 architectural practices that have signed up to this, and there's loads of volunteers that do different types of initiatives, and Product Aware is one of them. There's some of the volunteers here present also here at the front, Eulalia and Adrian, that were involved with Product Aware, and many others. So yeah, the idea is to basically, rather than wait for policy to change, it's actually taking back control of like what we can do as architects to make a change. So you already spoke about the need for climate action, so we don't need to go into that. But this is what Product Aware looks like, and Matthias will go through in detail of a demonstration. But I'd like to first talk to you about, the general specifics of Product Aware and why it actually exists. So it's both a product database so that you can consciously select sustainable materials, but it's also a form of advocacy so that you can learn about what actually sustainable materials are and get an understanding and basically standardize how we talk about sustainability in the product and material space. But first of all, let's talk about why materials matter so much. So as architects and designers, we specify materials and products every day, at least in our practice. Also, when you're in your projects, it's maybe later down the stages, but it's something that you do a lot. When you design, you select what products and materials you're going to use for your project. But I just want to know, when you're doing that, how much do you actually know what's in the material that you're specifying or the product? Do you, hands up if you know what's actually in the material, like actually know what's in them? No one? Okay, thanks for your honesty. We didn't know either, not really. But I'm going to talk to some of the facts, basically, of why it's so important that we know a bit more about what's in them, and that transparency is really required. So many materials have toxic elements in them, and they pose a high risk to human health. Also, embodied carbon is something that's coming, it's becoming more important, but it's something that for many years we didn't really talk about, the embodied carbon of materials. In terms of stats, In 2019, embodied carbon contributed to 22% of the Australian building emissions. And if we fast forward to 2050, when a lot of the grid will be green, it's going to be about 85%. Also, about 50% of the global extraction and consumption of raw materials is actually attributed to the construction industry. And also the way that many of these materials are extracted is really incredibly harmful on the environment, and we're just not recognizing that. And it's not very clear, it's not transparent when we buy a material or product and select one. If we talk about waste, it's about 40% of Australia's total waste that comes from construction and demolition. And in Australia, only about 3% of the entire economy is circular. So we've got a long way to go in this aspect. And also, let's not forget about forced labor. It's about 18% of forced labor that occurs in the construction industry, and we're quite unaware of that. So material choices do matter a lot. They have an impact on human health, on climate and ecosystem health, and human rights. And it is something that we have to tackle today. And not just look at one aspect, you know, not just have the tunnel vision on, let's say, embodied carbon, because that's very important, but actually look at, okay, what does that actually mean in terms of circularity or the climate and ecosystem health and human rights. So when we were looking, you know, at these different issues as a, you know, as a group of volunteer architects, we realized that there's no real alignment on what constitutes a sustainable product. Everyone thinks that, you know, their certification might be the better one to follow. It's very confusing out there, and you basically, I don't know what your your experience was, but it's very easy to freeze and not know. You go into analysis paralysis. There's so much information out there, and it's just too much and too confusing. So at the moment, if let's say you were an architectural practice that was a bit more conscious, you would actually ask a supplier what's in your product, and then you would get sort of some responses back, and sometimes a proof of EPD or proof of a modern slavery statement or something else. If your practice is responsible, others don't do this at all because it requires a lot of time and they don't have the money to do it. Sometimes the suppliers themselves didn't know actually what's in their products and materials, so they had to then go and ask the manufacturers. And then, you know, once we're happy with it, we then implement it in our projects. But the problem was that, you know, every single one of our practices was doing the same thing. So we were asking different questions and getting different answers back, and the process was quite slow. It's like it was driving suppliers insane, really. And it was costing us a lot of money to do that, and time, like architectural practices. So what we want to move on to is from a place where we all ask different questions and take quite a lot of time to get answers to actually an alignment, a common framework of criteria of what we actually mean with sustainable products. So we came up with these 4 criteria for sustainable materials or products. This was, we looked at what's happening in the entire world. The Common Materials Framework from the US was, let's say, a big inspiration for this. And we came up with human health, climate and ecosystem health, circularity, waste and minimization, and social responsibility, equity, and human rights. And the idea was that rather than us all doing these different questionnaires separately, let's have a one-stop shop for uploading and accessing all the data. So if as an architect, you would ask the supplier to provide some information, they would add it to the database, and then another architect could access this without having to actually go through the same process. And yeah, so that's the whole idea of why we created that. And now Matthias will go through the nitty-gritty of how the platform works.
Thanks so much. So if you go to productaware.au, that's the address there, you'll be greeted with this kind of screen. First, you have to sign in first. So you just put your email up, of course, but then these kind of two sides of the platform will appear. On the one hand side, you have the database for architects, for specifiers to find your products. Or if you are a supplier, you would go to add products, and then you basically get directed to the questionnaire where you'll be asked, the information that Valerie just described. And in this sense, I guess product aware does more than one function, right? Of course, it's, as you said, the biggest time saver for architects, but also for suppliers, right? Because suppliers don't have to deal with so many different emails and respond to all the architects' questions, and architects can access information faster. The other, of course, is also, time saver in terms of comparison. So we can find products and find a substitute much faster, right? Before we had to, contact multiple kind of suppliers for the same product. And now you can see them all next to each other, which increases then the competition for the suppliers as well. And hopefully the main purpose is to advocate for suppliers to create that information that we need, because without that information and the data, we won't be able to, for example, calculate carbon footprints or ensure that we actually have an ethical supply chain. So once you logged in, this is your first kind of greeting display with the first products there. They are randomized with the last 20 entries there. And then the most important thing is, of course, finding your products and the sorting and the filtering. So you would start off with the top line where you can go basically after categories, right? So for example, certain paints or furniture or things like that. So basically the larger categories that are common in the industry. And then there's, to the left to that, there's a little button, this little kind of, if we go, maybe I can show you there. You see that? Yeah, there. It's a little button there, and then this pop-up menu opens up, which is kind of the engine of your interface there. And that's where you can then, for example, sort all your products by the lowest carbon value, sort all your products from this particular category for your water footprint. What do we have there? So it's the most important ones that we defined as carbon, water, recycled content. So as you know, that is the other kind of most important information that we need if we think about carbon. One side is, of course, upfront carbon. How much do we put in the building, but what happens at end of life as well? And that is information that is not readily available at the moment at all in Australia, right? So that's something that we really want to push and understand better. So the recyclability of the recycled content, so upstream and downstream from your use of your products. And then the interesting bit is also the distance. As you know, we have carbon emissions associated with transport, and you might have a product that is local, but has a higher carbon footprint, and compare that to a product that comes from far away, but has a very low carbon footprint. So you might want to know how much carbon is then embedded in the transport, and that's part of your consideration. In order to do that, of course, you have to put a location in for your project there. And then because every supplier puts in the location of the factory and the manufacturing location, we can then calculate the distance of the transport that's required. There are two other major kind of search functions there. One is for certification. For example, products could be pre-certified with GECA or Green Building Council or other labels, green labels. And most of them, have overlapping questions, but don't cover all the same questions. But you might have a project where it's, for example, a living building project, and you need to ensure that all your products don't have any, chemicals in them and are not on the red list, for example. So you could filter by that as well. When you then basically your selected products will appear, and then you click on that product, and then you get actually to the data sheet, right? And that is based on the questionnaire that we discussed earlier. And we did a very long kind of industry consultation with that, asking lots and lots and lots of architects, of course, but also suppliers and industry groupings and organizations. So, I guess the process took almost a year to finalize the questionnaire and get it signed off from everyone in the industry and all the architects. And it starts off with general product details, product information, who's making it, what are the dimensions, where is it coming from, and so forth. And a description generally about the product itself. And then on the other aspect, where these the 4 pillars that we talked about earlier, we have human health, we have climate and ecosystem, waste minimization, also social responsibility. That's the main areas there. Human health, of course, refers to the actual substances and chemicals that are in those materials. And climate and ecosystem health is relating to carbon, to water, for example. Waste minimization is really interesting, as I mentioned earlier, with the circularity, which is an up-and-coming topic right now. It's not fully defined yet. We don't really understand what circularity, if we judge a building, is a building circular? How can you actually say this is more or less circular? Looking at all the kind of recyclability of products, but are they recyclable in Australia? So there's a lot of, kind of information that we don't really have or don't really understand. And this is meant to, one of the tasks of this tool is to unify and to standardize. So we have the same responses from everybody. There's also a completeness survey or score embedded in that form or questionnaire. It basically does not judge the product itself or the sustainability of the material. It rather looks at how many questions have been answered. So many suppliers don't have all the answers yet. For example, they weren't able to calculate their carbon footprint yet. If you have an EPD, that's easy because most of the information that's in the EPD is then similar to what we're asking in the questionnaire, but not all maybe there could be emerging products, for example. They might not be able to afford certain information or generating that information yet. So they can still put all the other information there, but you will see on the score how much they actually completed. And then the other aspect, apart from, certifications are really important for architects, of course. You can imagine you need a certain fire rating or certain, requirements of components or, waterproofing or something like that. That's also filterable there in the D section as well. And I guess this is interesting. That's an interesting slide that we didn't have in last time. To judge, right? To judge products. So it's really important that you only get information from the questionnaire and you have to make a judgment yourself still. You still need to make the judgment, for example, more water versus less carbon or other things like that. So what's more important to you? What's more important for your client? What's more important for the project? What are your project goals, right? So you still have to, the tool will help you to get all the information faster, but you still have to do your own judgment in terms of what's more or less sustainable and what your priorities are in this kind of sense. So just to sum up again, and I hand over to Lucy now in talking about the benefits and how we're using them.
Thanks, Matthias. Yes, so I guess to really just sum up, we've now kind of gone through the reason for the tool and what the platform is and how to use it. There's probably 3 key benefits that we've identified. The first is the fact that it is a unified approach. So this common framework that's been created, and this framework, by the way, is aligned with, as mentioned, a number of other frameworks. So the Common Materials Framework, which is an overseas sort of large sort of standardization around how material sustainability is assessed. Also, there's been a lot of engagement with the GBCA on this tool to ensure that there are alignments in a lot of the questions and the strategies and categories with the GBCA as well. So there's really a very unified approach in terms of what the categories are in the tool. And also it's a unified approach in terms of the industry coming together and asking questions about sustainability, using terminology in a standardized way that means it really just makes it much clearer in the requests that we make to suppliers, and therefore ultimately reduces confusion and increases uptake in terms of suppliers engaging with sustainability and providing information around sustainability for their products. The second point is that it's really clear advocacy to the industry as well, to the supplier and manufacturing side of the industry. This is really a call to action to suppliers that sustainability is an important part of the specification process for architects and designers. And just like we consider performance, price, time frames, lead times for products, sustainability criteria forms an important part of our decision-making process. So it's about advocating to the supplier and manufacturer side of the industry that sustainability matters in our choices. And then finally, the fact that this platform is free, open source, and centralizes all the data in a single location is a really important part of what it's about and what it does for the industry. As far as we're aware from all of our research into platforms available for information on sustainability, this is the only one that is tailored to the Australian market, free and open source to all parties, so both specifiers and suppliers. And what that means and why it's really important is that it reduces the barriers for anyone to participate. So there's no reason that a supplier can't upload their information to the platform, because there's nothing stopping them apart from probably needing an email address to sign in. So that's really important, just to create the engagement on both sides of the industry. Thank you. Anna.
You hear me? Yeah, that's good. Thanks a lot for that fantastic presentation. And before we're going to open up the questions to the audience, there are a few questions I would like to ask you. Maybe Lucy, you first. Could you talk a little bit about the business as usual mode of a project design delivery that Product Aware seeks to alter or disrupt?
Sure. So I don't know that it's necessarily trying to disrupt. It's more that it's probably about trying to fit in and support the process of how we currently specify products and undertake research for product selection in projects. I touched on it earlier that there's a set of criteria that we use for all material selection at the moment in project work. That includes things like the performance, the durability of material, its suitability for a certain function, its price, its lead time, and what it looks like. So I suppose one of the challenges at the moment is that sustainability often, as part of that sort of standard criteria, may not necessarily get considered in the product selection process, or it's getting considered in quite a haphazard manner in terms of people not knowing necessarily what questions to be asking or what should be prioritised for the project. So really, I suppose what Product Aware is doing is bringing those considerations to the forefront, able to be used as part of that standard product selection process, and trying to make it easier for specifiers by providing the information that they need to be able to provide to suppliers, and making it easier then for the supplier as well to be able to provide that information once in a standardised format back to the whole industry.
Good, wonderful, thank you. The next question will be, Matthias, for you. What does the questionnaire differ from an EPDs or the certifications?
Well, on the one hand side, EPDs are not fully standardized. So if you look at different EPDs, it's very complicated to understand.
What is an EPD?
On EPDs, I'm sorry, it's Environmental Product Declaration, right? So that's the starting point of suppliers to provide information on sustainability. But it's not answering all our questions to start with, right? So there's a lot of information that is missing, for example, around circularity or supply chain. Often they have carbon values, which are useful. That's one of the things that we need to know, but they are very difficult to understand, and they're not always. They don't have a standardized format either. So you kind of have to have a little bit of pre-knowledge to actually understand what's in the EPD, right? And I guess the benefit here is the Product Aware is super easy to understand, right? It's very clear to. There's a lot of help functions as well, where you can get more information about things or definitions, for example. So it's I mean, as Lucy was saying, it's a learning tool for our suppliers, because, and I was thinking about the disruptive a little bit, it is meant to be a little bit disruptive, because we do say to the Australian suppliers, you need to get your act in gear, because otherwise we have to import products if you can't give us the information, right? So from that kind of point of view, we do try to do the advocacy and training or showing the suppliers well, this is all the stuff we need in the future, right? We don't need everything today, but we will need it in a few years' time. So you have to get your act in gear or you won't be able to be specified anymore. And we do have some of our partners in Architects Declare are already going that way and announced that to their suppliers that you have 12 months time and you have to get your act in gear, right? So I think that's really the biggest benefit, easier to understand, easy to find, more information that we need, and yeah, intuitive, right? So.
Wonderful. Given that we've been at university, of course, education and training is quite important. So how do you think after students might start to engage with and use the platform? Valerie, you teach here. What are your thoughts?
Not yet. Hopefully, hopefully next term. So similar to how it's meant to be an advocacy tool for manufacturers and also a learning tool for designers so that they know what are the questions that we need to ask in terms of what a sustainable material is. It's the same thing for students. It's like you can just go to the platform. It has got guides as well that explain to you what are the different considerations that you need to look into when you talk about sustainability in the product and material space. So it's a learning tool, really. And in terms of how students can use it, apart from learning, it's obviously you can specify it, you can engage with suppliers, but we'd love to hear from you, now that you've heard about Product Aware, how do you actually see this being beneficial in your day-to-day? And is there anything that you guys see like you could play a role in making this better? Would like to hear from you as well. So
I think my other consideration around how students can potentially engage, and I think Valerie's right, we are interested to sort of hear once you guys have a chance to actually engage with it, what you think. But the fact that this tool is about gleaning data, so we're going to be, particularly as there's more and more uptake from architects, designers and students, asking suppliers to upload and save information to this platform. We start to have all of this data that comes across all of these standardised categories and all these standardised questions that provides quite a great opportunity for doing something with that data, for research projects, potentially for PhD, for practical strategies of how that could relate to real life project opportunities.
Definitely will take that on. Maybe a follow-up question for you, Valerie. What impact do you hope the platform like this might have on the building design, procurement and delivery process?
yeah, so I mean, when we started this, the whole idea was to have impact at scale and make it, and with sustainability in general, really, the rule is make it easy. Make sustainability application easy so that people can actually apply it. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to streamline this. We're trying to scale it up in the whole industry. We are collaborating not just with architects all across, but also with suppliers declare, which is basically the same thing as architects declare, but on the supplier side. So they're getting on gear. They're really getting started with understanding this. I mean, the first step is really education. So they're getting familiar with what actually constitutes sustainable material. How can we get started? And it's not about being perfect. It's just the first step is just transparency. So fill in if you've got zero information, then at least you know where you stand. And then, okay, pick one. Which one are you most interested in? Which one really matters for your product? Okay, is it embodied carbon? Is it water? What is it that you need to look at? And then it's just about getting started. And you guys may want to add something to this.
Look, any more questions?
I think for me, it's time saver. Complicated is one thing. It has to be easy, but to get it implemented and actually used by architects, at least speaking for my company, we're always struggling for time. There's always a limit of time that you can spend on a certain task. There's a limit of fee that we can get, and that means we have a certain amount of time left, basically. So that is was one of the biggest hurdles before, to invest that time or convince your project team that it makes sense, right, to put that extra time and to find those alternative products. And then how can you then ensure that we just maybe looked at one or two because you used them before, that you actually have the best one, right? Because you need to do a full-blown internet search and then reach out to all the suppliers for every project. And that's the other kind of way of getting it over the line, or the buy-in from the studios, because we did it for every single project. People reached out to the same suppliers again, got the same EPDs, tried to understand and make sense of it. So the duplication within one company, and then think about the duplication across the industry. Every studio did that, right? So for us, it's like it's money basically. And secondly, it's the better information, better data. So now we can actually compare two things because we're comparing apples and apples and not, oranges and apples like before.
Lucy, we spoke before about what it means to the business as usual in the context of the students. In a few years' time, when the students have graduated at the beginning of their career, what do you think the design for students would be different in the future with that tool in mind?
What I really hope to see and envisage with, the advocacy and the adoption of tools like this one, and what many of us, here and across Architects Declare are doing in terms of trying to advocate for sustainability just being part of, much more prevalent in the design and project process. I envisage sustainability being just a standard part of the product specification process. So I think tools like this being something that people refer to almost as, the first thing that they look at when they start thinking about what do I need for this project. Like if I'm starting by building a building, even just before I get into products from a material basis, which direction am I going? Which one's the lower carbon? I know that's something that you're, advocating and doing within the university already. So really tools like this, it's about supporting that thinking and that approach to putting sustainability, carbon reduction, waste minimisation at the centre of the design process from the outset, and having a tool like this that's a support to enable people to make product choices on the basis of that framework. And look, I think I raise it for it being in 5 years' time because that's really not how a lot of projects happen now. It's not. I think you guys would agree. Unfortunately, it's not the standard practice. There's all this other criteria, and half the time sustainability is almost this back page of the report. Oh, what are we going to say is the, so. It's really flipping that in terms of where it sits in the design process.
I do that because I know a lot of you are already working in practice. So I think it's part of the advocacy that needs to happen from graduates and from students as well, to start showing like your practices wherever it is that you're working. Look, we should be using this tool, and this is what most architects are using nowadays. And I think it's all about spreading the word. It's about raising awareness and making the change. But we can only do it if loads of us do it together. Yeah.
And I might add one more. And I think that's where the students and universities actually come in, because to drive change, right? So imagine you enter a practice with that knowledge that this platform exists, right? So that's another good way to actually bring that innovation and bring that different way of thinking and a bit of more, background knowledge and, the application itself of being more sustainable and knowing how to find things like this. That's the innovation you bring into the studio. And I think that is really how we can help change the environment, built environment faster. I think through students, similar to other tools, right? It's like a tool like any other. I mean, the Revit, for example, when you think about those times when we went from 2D to 3D drawings, it was a huge expense of the studios to actually train up their existing staff. And the real change happened when the students that already were trained in this came into the studios and then really drove that change to much faster and much more cost effective. So I think universities coming back to other engines of innovation. Yeah.
Thank you. One question for you now. Are you thinking about ways of measuring the uptake and the impact of product aware to measure change, so to demonstrate change and impact?
Yes, so that's a really interesting one, because what do we do with the data? So obviously, starting off first with the questionnaire. First, we wanted to have answers to questions, right? And then you think like, well, we're going to save that, so we actually have data. So the next question is, what do we do with that data other than just comparing things, right? So we can really see, for example, transformation across the industry, uptake of new technology, of new products. And I think that's a really a big strength of product, because it's free and you don't have to pay expensive other certifications. You can actually get completely new products on it as well, which you otherwise may not be able to find, right? So if you look at plasterboard and then there's a new algae-based alternative to plasterboard, how would you otherwise find that without doing an extensive research, right? But here, if you just look for your normal product, there's always going to be another one next to that now, which may be better. So I think, yeah, looking at the user interface as well, that's another aspect as well. How do we interact with the tool? What can we improve further, right? How do people use it? And how can we make that even better and easy as well? And the other aspect is we're looking at probably in the next phase, we have about 1,000 products on it now. So it's still early days. It's growing fast because we're now getting just to see big players who put lots of products on it. And as you know, once your competitors on it, you have to also put your product on it, or you won't be specified, right? So it's going to be exponential growth, I think. But then we're going to do the development of APIs, for example, so we can seamlessly integrate it into our existing systems or specifications and things like that. So that's then, the next level of time saving again and efficiency, really. That will make our job easier and more effective.
And happy to help in those initiatives at the center, of course. But before we open up the call for the audience as well, question to all of you. How can universities or students get involved more? What do you need?
I think advocacy for sure. So start using it in your projects, and the second, start engaging with suppliers as well, and also I think the next iteration is something that we'll have to see. There's so many research opportunities that are coming out of this, and I think that's up to you. Would like to open to your ideas as well. How do you think you might get engaged with a platform like this one?
Yeah, so the data is freely available, of course, to you as well, and we're happy to package it up for any research project. But specifically, I think the next stage will be vetting. So how do we find out if our suppliers actually put the right data in, and how can we check that? So that needs to be some kind of quality control measure at some point to see really to give it not a rubber stamp, but to really see, do we have to improve something? Do we have to be clearer with questions? Does everyone really understand what we want? Do we get what we want? Do we get the information that we want? Things like that. I think that will be the next step. Reliability on the data. I think that's something we have to establish next.
Yeah, look, I think that's where there's probably an opportunity to have some engagement with course coordinators, or sort of at a university leadership and academia level around what the opportunities are that we see from a practice perspective, what the needs are, what are the needs, as Matthias says, are of the platform to get the quality of the data a bit better, and also what your needs are from a university perspective of what kind of skills your students are wanting to learn, like how you can actually use this as a learning tool to learn about all of this criteria that I can tell you now, when you come into practice, and if you work on, whether it be, if you work in large practices like any of us do, things like Green Star certifications and there's a whole myriad of certifications and Living Building Challenge and things that you actually need to learn about and understand a lot of these sustainability categories. So this is a really great opportunity to engage with that, right from university stage.
Good, thank you. So I want to open up the questions to the floor. Are there any questions from anyone in the audience? Thank you, Barbara.
It's the biggest impact that we can make on the designs and carbon and all of these material aspects happening at early stages during the parametrics and computational studies. It's quite impossible to manually grab all of this information from the website and bring it into your digital space. So is there a future scaling that you consider to bring this data, let's say in Grasshopper, where the optimization can happen in flow with the materials information?
Yes, exactly. That's what we want to do. That's the next step, right? So it's great to have the information there, but how can we integrate it properly into the systems? It's the next thing. I think that first to the APIs that we want to, how to utilize that data, download it and integrate it in different platforms. So, the studios would have different ways of getting it into specification. But it's a good point. We often look at materials at the end of a project, in the last stage. So first you would have a concept design, and then design development, you need to submit a DA. And at that point, it's more aesthetic concerns, really, and not so much the actual material. So, it's going to be looking like somehow something, and you will try, probably at the moment, that's the process at least, people will look up, material kind of replacements, more or less, because they go to the default option that they used last year or the year before or always. And now, people like us come in and say, like, look, we can do maybe better. And then the danger is that you have to do the rework. So the question is really, how do we get it in the early process of the design as well, to inform, the aesthetics and the choice of the materials as well. But at the end of the day, I think that is something we still have to figure out how exactly. We have the data, and we know what we're using today, what the business looks like and specification and things like that. And I guess that will be the open door also, or the call for the students to come up with that years. How can we technically now get that properly integrated into, for example, carbon tools, right? There's one-click SEA that people might know and use already, and it's a standard database. So how can you personalize that now to that data, for example? That's the most obvious kind of application, or to have an interface that works with all bunches of kind of different carbon tools, because every studio, every other one's developing their own carbon tool or use a different brand. So make it really universal. I think that's the next step.
Maybe there's a quick offer there for all the industry partners, for yourself and industry partners in the audience. We've got the FUNSW's computational design degree in term 2 coming up shortly, and a coordination project again, where we always look for industry projects and industry problems that the students could solve, and a Grasshopper integration of product aware would be a perfect student project that the students could do. So we've got years and years of experience in doing that. So please, most of the people from industry know the industry pitch. So we've got an industry pitch coming up in week 9. We've got in week 4 the month, in 5 weeks' time. That's the perfect project, and we could solve that immediately with the students.
Thank you very much. It was a really interesting tool, to put into the workflow. My question is, there are a lot of parameters that goes into material selection, whether that is structural, material, or it's architectural, finish that you put there. And less carbon is one of these parameters, of course, but then you offset it against so many others. Could be the strength, could be durability, could be something else. So how do you, my question, like, how do you evaluate that set of selection of material, based on that, the overall performance, I would say, so the performance of the material itself that goes into the selection. So even if you want to compare a piece of timber with a piece of steel, for example, there is so many different parameters on unit, but at the end, how do you decide I'm going to choose that because this is better? Not just based on carbon, but based on overall performance, which usually the client or the builder, you want to use. So that's one question. The other one is have you tried it on a project to see which phase of the project is really most effective to use it?
I might actually start with your second question. Okay. Just thinking about and off the back of where it could go, I think it's good to understand where it is now and what we are using it for. So there's probably 2 key phases at the moment that we're practically using it on in projects, which I think it's really, really effective for. The first is in that I suppose, concept stage, or when we're thinking about which materials to use, and just from a high level to be able to understand a product's inherent values around carbon, waste minimization, what the product's made of, chemicals, red list free, all of those kinds of criteria, to be thinking when we're selecting, is it timber or is it steel? So there's that stage that this product aware, you can be getting information, whether it's for a specific product or for a product category or a type of material from, that I think can be quite useful. The second place that we're using it in a very practical sense is during the design development phase. So when we're actually really, particularly we work on, say, a lot of large scale multi-residential projects. So making one decision about the product we put on the floor, or the kitchen bench tops that's going into 1,000 apartments, making a decision about a product A or product B based on the carbon as well as the other factors to do with performance and whatnot, it's really valuable there. So an example we've just used recently in one of my projects is to look at, we're using vinyl on the floor, large student accommodation project, but we basically compared two similar vinyls that look similar, they perform the same, they're both from reputable suppliers. One was locally manufactured and had a lower carbon number per square metre, per cubic metre, and the other one was imported and was higher upfront carbon. So it was just useful to have that information to use, and price comparable. So we were able to use that to say, okay, we're going to go with this one for these reasons.
Okay. Prioritization of your criteria. We have certain performance criteria you can filter for them. So that's one thing. So, there might be like fire rating that I mentioned earlier as well. There's a given, there's a certain performance that you have to achieve with a certain material or flammability or something like this. That's reduces your kind of amount of materials that the filter will show, right? And then the next thing for me, the most important next one would be the carbon factor, because that's very topical today, right? So we don't want to build buildings anymore that have a lot of carbon, because we have to do something about climate change as soon as possible. But the other informations are also important, right? Because supply chains is something that we have to vet now for all our projects, right? We need to know where stuff's coming from, and we need to be able to ask those questions to our suppliers. So that's also a requirement, right? Rather than a nice to have. You could say the price is actually really important, because that's also going to be displayed on that product, product aware. And that's usually in real life, that's your budget, right? So you have a certain budget from your client, and you have to fit it into that. So if you take the dollar, then you can clearly see that, well, okay, we've got 5 materials that are in that, or products that are in that range. And then we can say, like, this has the lowest carbon, this has the lowest water footprint, and this is local. And yeah, okay, now the question is, what is your most important criteria? Do you want to go low carbon, but it's imported from Italy? Or do you want to go local because your project is interested in supporting local jobs? That's a value judgment that you probably have to make on a case-by-case basis, and depending on the project and the client and their aspirational or not so aspirational targets. But in my experience, it's always the price that counts, not the carbon value, right? So you always have to, that is the first boundary, I suppose, that is given to you. And then within that boundary, you can go, okay, we have to do something about carbon. And okay, then we have the carbon, and then we go like next level down, maybe, okay, look at the water. Water footprint is massive, so we just go for that. So it just helps you having discussions with your clients and your project team about the pros and cons for every project, for every product that you choose. And I guess that wasn't possible before, because we only had little bits of information, right? We would know that this is really good for recycling and this is really low carbon. But what's the recycled one? What's the carbon factor there? We didn't know that. There was too much missing, right? And I guess that's what we try to address. Same information for all products. If it's complete, we can make that decision.
Just add to this that it's really helping suppliers act on this faster as well. Sometimes we say, hey, we didn't choose your material. They're like, oh, did you choose me? Who did you choose? And why? And so on. And they're actually starting to, okay, right, circularity is important to you. Okay. That's the next thing we're going to look at. So it's actually working. Yeah. Right.
ask a question just because it's directly related to the cost thing?
Yes, same, but you go first.
I was just going to say, hopes and dreams die when cost conversations come up. And I'm wondering, like in the construction industry, there's a price of a material, but that's also not, that's a flexible number, right? Because depending on how much you buy, are there existing relationships, are there deals that are cut? You know, it's a great area. So I'm wondering, have you had a look at the data of the different products that are on Product Aware? How many suppliers have actually put a price figure, or is that just blank?
That's a good question. I think absolutely on the mark there. That's probably the sticky point for suppliers, because they want to be able to negotiate and at least, you know, appear to make a deal with you. But also that's the one value that changes the most. So inflation or whatever happens in the world, and all of a sudden supply chain changes and it's more expensive. So I guess that would be a good research project to actually see what's the proportion and why isn't like that, and maybe talking to those suppliers where they couldn't put up or didn't want to put up the price and understanding that better. I think that would be very interesting to find out.
I have a interesting and very recent, and I think good news story on the price discussion though, because I think one of the things we are always challenged with is you know, the price versus sustainability, and it's very relevant to where we are at the moment. I'm literally in conversations with a client right now about a large scale project opportunity using green ceramics, which were actually invented in your research laboratories here, but they've now been commercialized. And because of I suppose the fact that the product is made from, you know, a waste resource, and it's performing to a level of durability and performance and other things that, you know, traditionally we have used reconstituted stone. And the supplier is very keen to work on the project because it's an opportunity to work on a large scale project. They gave me a price today of the product for this project scale, and it came in at half of the price of the alternatives that we are considering, which is what you would consider sort of industry standard for that kind of application. So it's actually a really interesting space, I think, putting aside whether people are putting the prices on the website or trying to cut a deal, around, you know, opportunities here with circularity and new product and product innovation. It's not necessarily always going like I was surprised, but I was very pleasantly surprised to see the direction that product is going in comparison to where the market sits now.
I wanted to add one thing, because going to the first question that you had, you were asking the carbon value versus durability. I think that's probably, you know, most of you know, but it's that we would look at the life cycle carbon footprint. So we would look at the whole duration of the building. So it's there 60 years, how many maintenance cycles you would have, and you know how long is your warranty and these kind of things. And then you see like, okay, I need to buy 5 times that kind of facade panel in the lifetime of the building, and that, you know, you add that up and then you compare that with another product that has maybe a higher carbon footprint in the beginning but will last twice as long, and at the end you come up with a certain number, and that would be as long as you're in the same price range. But the maintenance issues actually has a huge impact on price, right? Because that's an ongoing operational cost that any client who owns the building or, you know, was very interested in keeping those maintenance costs down. So that's an important consideration.
Are there any other questions? Otherwise, I would have one consideration of myself. I think, you know, what you get yourself into very, very quickly is into a large or big data problem. So you've got in a building thousands of different building components in there. And in your database, it's at thousands at the moment, exponentially going up, so it would be more and more. So for each building kind of component, you can make a decision, what is this product a better one, or is this product a better one? So suddenly your numbers and the consideration you have to make are very, very large, and it becomes too much of a human. So you mentioned you could make the decision on one particular element and say, going to use this and that. But if you're going to scale it up and really just going to optimize your complete building, you are dealing with a multi-object optimization problem. which again, through research, and I think that's where Syed's question comes from, could be solved. There are algorithms around where you can say, well, you put the fitness criteria into the system, say, this is what we're going to achieve. So we can describe what our ambitions for the projects are. And then through computational tools, you just could do generative algorithms and optimize your product selection to not just one element or one building product, but for eventually thousands of building elements and thousands of different products as well. And then if you mentioned before, Matthias, the main problem is the time factor. Well, as a human, you're not able to do that in any kind of time. It's just too complex. A machine can run that relatively straightforward with giving you answers maybe not in a minute, but within an hour or maybe within a day. And then suddenly you're not just looking into one element, but a larger kind of element. So again, I think there would be a very, very interesting research project that is conceptually and technically possible if you've got the data around.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Just thinking about all the applications that we are trying to invent right now to use AI. All right, so just couple that database with an AI filter. So you don't do the manual filtering yourself. You just prompt your engine, and it comes up with the a table or a list that is much more digestible. Absolutely, yes.
Any other questions, or all thirsty for a drink? Good, then. Thank you very much. First, thank you to Barbara and Ivana for organizing the event and for USW to give us the chance to host the event here. Of course, thank you for you to come to USW and present the tool. I think we're very supportive to help you with further developments in there, and good luck with putting more products on it. Well done.